Settle in, wherever you are in the world, and let the noise of today drift softly into the background. Tonight, together, we'll slip through the folds of time and step quietly into an age of flickering torchlight and the steady heartbeat of hammers on iron. As you get comfortable, maybe in bed or with a warm cup in hand, tell me where you're joining from and what the night feels like in your corner of the earth. There's something comforting in sharing these calm moments, letting history gently wash over us, connecting distant past and present in the stillness of evening. If stories like these help you slow down, breathe deep, and find a little peace, you're always welcome here. Subscribe if you'd like to wander through many more such tales together. Tonight, we follow the life of a medieval blacksmith, a figure caught between fire and tradition, shaping the world with every swing of the hammer, forever balancing solitude, skill, and the quiet magic that built civilization. Before the world stirs, in that silent moment when night reluctantly gives way to the first pale suggestion of dawn, a single, distant sound shivers through the darkness. The faint, steady breath of bellows and the low, ominous glow pulsing behind a thick wooden door. In a village that slumbers beneath a blanket of dew and shadow, the forge awakens first, its fire a small sun in a world otherwise ruled by the chill. The stones of the smithy are slick with last night's cold, but within, the ancient ritual is already underway, a dance of shadow and flame that has played out for centuries, almost unchanged. The air inside the forge is impossibly dense, saturated with the thick perfume of burning coal, sweat, and raw iron. It bites at the throat, burrowing deep into lungs that never truly grow used to it. Here, glass windows are a fantasy. Only crude, open slits in the thick stone walls allow thin ribbons of early mist to curl inside, instantly swallowed by the orange radiance of the flames. Darkness clings to every surface, only reluctantly retreating from the flickering forge at the heart of this little universe. In that twilight world, a figure stirs, small and thin and not yet grown into the bulk of his work. Thomas, the apprentice, is hardly more than a boy, his face smudged with soot, his hair still damp with sleep as he blinks in the half-light. He rises from a crude bed, a woolen blanket on bare stone, tucked beneath a heavy workbench, his body already marked by the peculiar hardships of this ancient trade. He is just 14, but his hands are rough, his palms calloused, and the first web of scars crisscrosses his fingers, evidence of lessons learned the hard way. Each morning, Thomas is first to greet the darkness. His task, always the same, is to coax life back into the forge. He kneels beside the heap of coals, gently stirring the cooling embers from the previous night, seeking the smallest hint of warmth within the ash. The silence is broken only by the rasp of iron against stone and the gentle murmur of Thomas's breath as he blows softly, encouraging the glow. Gradually, a spark takes hold, the embers flare, and the familiar hiss and pop of burning fuel fills the chamber. Thomas's world contracts to the flicker of orange and gold in the hearth, the heat already blooming on his face. He works quickly, his motions both practiced and urgent. The bellows, made from stitched leather and polished oak, are nearly as tall as he is. He heaves at their wooden handles with the full weight of his body, sending a pulse of air into the coals. The fire responds with a sudden, almost greedy roar. For a moment, the forge looks alive, a monster's eye opening in the gloom, daring the boy to begin another day. Behind Thomas, another shadow moves, larger, heavier, and marked by years. Master Edmund, the smith, stands in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame, a silhouette against the faint glimmer of dawn outside. At 40, Edmund is old by village standards, his face a map of old burns and healed cuts, his brow permanently furrowed. Even in this gentle hour, there is nothing soft about him. His hands, rougher than any tool, rest easily at his sides, yet radiate a quiet authority. His eyes, sharp and assessing, miss nothing. He nods once, and Thomas feels the invisible weight of expectation settle around him. Together, the two begin the day's first ritual, inspecting the tools, arranging the iron bars along the wall, clearing last night's ashes from the anvil. Every object in the smithy tells a story. Hammers, some heavy, some slender, bear the shine of constant use. Tongs, warped and blackened, lie in neat rows, each fitted for a different purpose. The anvil, pitted and polished by generations, sits at the heart of the room, its surface waiting for the first strike of the day. Outside, the village of Millbrook sleeps. Thatched roofs cluster beneath the watchful gaze of the church spire, and the cold air carries the promise of another ordinary day. Yet within the smithy, the day is already extraordinary. There is a timelessness in the fire, in the measured rhythm of hands at work, and in the unspoken bond between master and apprentice. The world out there depends on what happens in here, the nails that hold up roofs, the hinges that swing open doors, the tools that till the frozen ground. The forge is the silent heart of the community, beating long before its people rise. As the fire climbs higher, shadows leap across the walls. The forge is both sanctuary and trial, the place where a boy becomes something harder, something tempered by labor and flame. Thomas wipes the sweat from his brow, already feeling the day's heat, and listens for the first words from Edmund, a brief instruction, a warning, or sometimes just a grunt that means begin. There is comfort in the predictability, even in the hardship, and Thomas finds himself almost longing for the challenge. The outside world begins to stir. A rooster crows, a dog barks somewhere down the lane, and soon the village will wake. But for Thomas and Master Edmund, the day is already well underway, and the forge, alive and hungry, demands their full attention. Here, as sparks drift upward to vanish in the dim morning air, another chapter of their shared story is about to be hammered into shape, one strike at a time. The new day inside the smithy begins with a low groan from Thomas as he lifts the first bucket of coal, its weight sending a jolt through his thin arms and reminding him just how much he has grown in the last year. Every movement feels measured, dictated by the invisible rules of the trade. The forge must be tended first, long before thoughts of breakfast or daylight. There is a rhythm to these mornings that is older than memory, a choreography of sweat and discipline passed from master to apprentice for centuries. Thomas's hands, still stinging from the rough blanket and colder stone, find their way to the shovel. The coal is gritty and black, staining his fingernails for days no matter how often he scrubs. He tips a measured scoop onto the glowing embers, careful not to smother the fragile flame. Each grain sizzles and pops as it settles, giving off an acrid scent that seeps into skin and hair. In the half-light, the dust whirls around him like a living thing, catching in his throat, making him cough quietly so as not to disturb Master Edmund. Edmund's voice soon rumbles through the dimness. "Keep it steady, lad. Too much, you'll choke the fire. Too little, and you'll wait all morning for heat." There is a strange comfort in these gruff instructions, in knowing that this man who rarely smiles is always watching, always teaching. Edmund steps forward to check the draft, his practiced hand adjusting the bellows with a flick of the wrist. The forge breathes alive again, and the glow intensifies until Thomas has to squint against the sudden blaze. There is no time to stand idle. The ritual of preparation is relentless. Tools must be arranged, iron bars stacked within reach, the anvil wiped clean of last night's debris. The hammer, the smith's oldest companion, is selected for the day's work, its handle worn smooth and dark from countless grips. Every object has its place, and to neglect a single detail is to invite disaster. Even the apron that Thomas straps around his waist is a small shield, already marked with faint burns, each a silent memory of mistakes and hard lessons learned. Soon, the real work begins. The first task, as always, is to shape a new batch of nails, simple, humble, but essential to the village beyond these walls. Thomas takes up the iron tongs, their jaws scalding hot even before they touch the fire, and thrusts a bar of iron deep into the heart of the forge. He pumps the bellows with his whole body, fighting against the stubborn resistance that makes his arms ache and his breath come shallow. The fire responds, roaring louder, bathing the smithy in flickering orange light that makes the shadows dance and the metal gleam. There is a certain terror in this moment when the iron first begins to glow. The heat is not like that of the sun or a warm hearth. It is aggressive, consuming, radiating outward in thick, suffocating waves. Thomas can feel his skin tightening, beads of sweat tracing down his temples. Every muscle is tense, every nerve alert to the risk of a sudden, careless touch. It is in these early hours, with the world still quiet outside, that he most acutely senses the line between mastery and disaster. He draws the iron from the fire, its tip now a seething cherry red, and places it on the anvil. Master Edmund's hammer is already poised, waiting. The first strike lands with a shattering force, sending a spray of sparks arcing through the smoky air. The sound is both comforting and violent, a reminder of the power and danger held in this small, windowless space. Thomas watches the molten droplets scatter, instinctively turning his face aside to avoid the tiny burns that already dot his arms and cheeks. As Edmund works, Thomas learns the rhythm. Strike, turn, strike, turn. Each blow shapes the iron, but it cools quickly, and the process is a race against time. If they move too slowly, the metal hardens and the effort is wasted. Too quickly, and mistakes become permanent, scars in both the work and the worker. The apprentice's arms soon tremble from effort, his lungs burn from the smoke, but there is no pause. The hammer rises and falls, a steady drumbeat that drives away any lingering thoughts of sleep. The work is not gentle. By the time the first batch of nails is finished, Thomas's shirt clings to his back, soaked through with sweat. He wipes his brow on his sleeve, leaving a streak of black that no amount of scrubbing will remove. On his right thumb, a blister has already begun to form, another mark of progress, another lesson etched into flesh. Every day there is some new pain. The singed hairs on his forearms, the ache in his shoulders, the dull throb of a foot stepped too close to a falling ember. The forge is an unyielding teacher, and its lessons are always written in heat and fatigue. And yet, beneath the struggle, something within Thomas begins to change. He notices the small victories, a nailhead shaped just right, the satisfying clink of metal perfectly cooled, the approving grunt from Edmund as he surveys the work. These are rewards greater than coin, proof that in this world of fire and sweat, a boy can become more than he was at dawn. The sun finally breaks over the horizon, spilling gold through the cracks in the stone wall, and the village awakens at last. But for Thomas and his master, the morning has already passed through its own trial by fire. The forge blazes brighter, the day stretches before them, and the promise of mastery, of becoming something stronger and steadier than the iron itself, glimmers, just out of reach, in the heart of the flames. Inside the smithy, time loses its grip. Light barely seeps through the narrow stone slits in the walls, serving more to remind the senses of the world outside than to illuminate the cavernous room. Every surface bears the memory of fire, soot etched into stone, black streaks winding along the low beams, iron flecks scattered like tiny constellations across the rough-hewn floor. There are no windows, only small, crude openings that offer little relief from the suffocating air. The thick, oily smoke seems to curl and linger on purpose, hanging low, stinging eyes until they water, and noses until the scent of burning coal becomes an extension of breath itself. In summer, the forge becomes a furnace beyond imagining. The coals burn hotter than the midday sun, pushing the temperature inside high enough that sweat doesn't even have time to bead. It is drawn out and evaporates almost instantly. Thomas finds the air so heavy that breathing feels like work, each inhalation bringing with it a rush of burnt metal and scorched flesh. The walls, designed to hold in warmth through bitter winters, now trap the heat and bounce it back at the bodies inside, so relentless and close that skin prickles and thoughts slow. Yet, the fire can never be allowed to fade. The forge must always be ready, always alive. There is no escape from the haze. Even in the earliest hours, the acrid fog seeps into everything: clothing, hair, lungs. Thomas learns to move through the workshop like a ghost, sliding through the cloud, squinting against the sting. Every cough is harsh, edged with grit. Even the first deep breaths of morning, which ought to feel fresh, carry the sharp tang of the previous day's labor. By noon, eyes burn constantly, and tears trace clean lines through the soot on cheeks. The smoke is only half the torment. The real enemy is the heat. Edmund, whose skin is weathered by decades of work, has long stopped noticing it. His arms, bare and knotted, shimmer in the light of the forge, sweat running in rivers over old scars. He moves with a slow certainty, conserving energy, never wasting a step. Thomas tries to copy him, but every movement feels clumsy. The air steals strength, and the hammer feels twice as heavy as it did at dawn. Winter brings a different kind of hardship. The forge, the only source of warmth in the village, turns the smithy into a refuge of sorts, at least until the fire dies down. Frost creeps into the stones, numbing bare feet that slip from the sleeping mat onto the cold floor. The ache of the cold is a deep, insistent throb, burrowing into joints and refusing to let go. Iron, too, is more stubborn in the cold, harder to coax into a workable state, demanding even more effort from tired hands. Yet there is no rest, whatever the season. The world outside may change, but inside these walls, the battle between man and metal never ends. Each day brings its own set of wounds: a blister on the palm, a burn on the forearm from a stray spark, a bruise where a hammer missed its mark. Some injuries are sharp and quick, others slow and invisible. The lungs are the first to surrender, growing heavy and thick with the accumulation of smoke and dust. Small tragedies mark the days: a favorite tool lost in the ashes, a split seam in the bellows that brings the work to a standstill, the sudden hiss of water as a carelessly cooled piece of metal cracks and shatters. Sometimes it is simply the exhaustion that settles in the bones, a weariness so complete that Thomas wonders if it might swallow him whole. Yet with every hardship he learns. He becomes a little harder, a little more attuned to the rhythms of the workshop, a little more aware of how the smallest misstep can lead to pain.
Nothing in the smithy is truly safe, not even rest. Sleep offers no escape, only dreams clouded with smoke and the memory of hammer blows. But with each day survived, Thomas finds himself enduring a little more. The forge, for all its cruelty, is slowly forging him as well, burning away softness and shaping what remains into something new, something capable of surviving in this brutal, magnificent place. The first real lessons of the forge come not from words, but from the feel of tools in hand, the grind of muscle and bone against unyielding iron. Thomas's world narrows to the line of his arms, the weight of the hammer, the angry glow of hot metal. Edmund, never one for speeches, shows him once how to shape a nail, a gesture, a nod, a demonstration so quick and practiced it seems almost effortless. But the reality is far from simple. Thomas begins by learning to recognize the language of iron, the colors that tell its readiness, the subtle shifting from cold black to deep, living red, then brighter orange, then a fleeting moment of perfect cherry. That is the instant. Wait too long and the heat fades, move too fast and the iron bends before it is ready. He shovels the bar into the heart of the fire, works the bellows with both feet planted and back braced, every pump of air stoking the fire's hunger until the forge screams with heat. Once the hammer felt impossibly heavy. Now he can just manage its weight for a minute or two, arms trembling, hands slick with sweat. He is taught to grip not at the very end, where leverage is greatest but control is lost, nor too close to the head, where each glow is weak. Somewhere in between, always balancing force and precision. The rhythm is strange. Lift, breathe, bring the hammer down, let it rebound, find the next angle. Every strike reverberates through his hands, up his forearms, into shoulders still not grown. It's a pain that quickly becomes familiar. First a dull ache, then a burning, and at last numbness. The creation of a single nail becomes a small epic. He draws the iron bar from the flames, the end soft and glowing, and with tongs, awkward, stiff at first, places it on the anvil. Edmund, standing close, watches for hesitation, correcting with a grunt or a sharp word if Thomas fumbles the timing. The hammer descends, flattening the end with careful force. Each strike must be true. A missed blow can send sparks flying or the iron skittering off the anvil, a lesson sometimes learned in pain.
The next step is to draw the softened metal into a taper, turning the bar, striking with the narrow face of the hammer, feeling the resistance shift as the iron stretches and lengthens. Thomas's arms ache, wrists burning, palms raw against the rough wood of the handle. He wipes sweat from his brow with a forearm already spotted with old burns. The noise is constant. Hammer against metal, metal against anvil, the sharp hiss of hot iron when it's dipped in water to set its shape. Each nail is made one at a time. No shortcuts, no machines, only the measured discipline of heat, muscle, and patience. Tongs are an extension of the hand, but they bite and pinch if held too long. Their metal handles become dangerously hot. Thomas learns quickly to set them aside or risk a new burn. The anvil's surface is not perfectly flat. Years of pounding have left dips and scars, places where the iron can catch or slip. A careless move and the nail will twist, or worse, snap. There are other tools to master: files for smoothing rough edges, punches for making holes, chisels for cutting or marking. Each demands a different grip, a different pressure, a different awareness. The first time Thomas tries to use the chisel, he misjudges the force, sending it skidding across the anvil and drawing a gasp from Edmund. The embarrassment stings as much as the shallow scrape it leaves on his knuckle. Muscle memory comes slowly. The first few weeks, Thomas's hands shake at night, fingers cramping as he tries to stretch them straight. He wakes with aches in his back and shoulders, bruises blooming across his forearms where the hammer slipped or a stray spark landed. Yet, gradually, something inside him shifts. The pain remains, but the fear of pain fades. He begins to judge the temperature of the iron by its color and the way it resists the hammer. He feels the moment when the metal yields, the instant when it is too late and must return to the fire. Edmund offers no praise, but his corrections grow fewer. One day, as Thomas sets the head on a finished nail and strikes it cleanly with the small cross-peen hammer, there is no word at all, only a nod, and that means more than anything. By dusk, a small pile of nails sits on the workbench, each one imperfect, each one a testament to the cost of learning. Thomas's arms feel as though they might fall off, but for the first time, he allows himself a brief moment of satisfaction. This is how the body learns, through repetition, through trial and error, through small wounds that harden into strength. In the forge, nothing comes easy, but every callus and bruise is a step closer to mastery. Days in the forge follow each other with a relentless sameness, a rhythm as steady and unyielding as the anvil itself. There is no such thing as a true beginning or end, only the rolling tide of labor that swells at dawn and recedes well after darkness has fallen outside. Even the most sacred holidays, the feast days when the whole village gathers near the church, provide only a brief pause in the endless work. The fire must be kept alive, iron must be shaped, and the needs of the village never wait for permission. Thomas awakens each morning long before the world outside stirs. The air is cool at first, the stone beneath his blanket biting at his skin. But already the forge beckons, the promise of warmth pulling him from uneasy dreams. Every morning is a negotiation between body and will, a silent contest of exhaustion against necessity. Sometimes, even before he rises, he can hear Edmund's boots scraping against the floor, the old master already at work arranging tools or tending embers that must never be allowed to die. From the first light to the last, every hour is claimed by the needs of the smithy. There are always orders waiting: horseshoes for the miller's gray mare, a broken hinge for the innkeeper's door, a new set of nails for the carpenter, a battered plowshare to be reforged before planting. The tasks never line up neatly, and Thomas learns to move from one job to the next with hardly a pause, his hands blackened by soot and streaked with sweat by mid-morning. Meals are snatched quickly, bread and cheese swallowed in the corner while metal glows in the fire. There is no dining table, only the broad back of the workbench and the watchful gaze of Edmund, whose idea of rest is to lean briefly against the anvil, arms crossed, face unreadable. Time blurs. Sometimes Thomas wonders if it is morning or afternoon. Only the shifting light, faintly glimpsed through those narrow slits in the wall, hints at the hour. The demands on the body are constant. His arms ache from swinging the hammer, his shoulders burn from lifting buckets of coal, and his lungs sting with every breath. Yet there is no stopping. Even as fatigue sets in, Edmund expects focus. Every mistake means lost time, wasted iron, or risk of injury. The pace is a test, and the smithy itself seems to demand tribute from those who work within its walls: skin, strength, the echoing ache in tired bones. As the sun crosses the sky, heat in the forge grows almost unbearable. Thomas's clothes stick to his skin, his hair plastered to his brow. He loses count of the hours and the blows of the hammer, each one blending into the next. The only respite comes with the briefest of pauses, a trip to the well for water, or the short walk outside to let the smoke clear from his throat. But even then, he is mindful of time slipping away, of unfinished work waiting in the red heart of the fire. When darkness falls, the rhythm slows but never truly stops. There are tools to clean, scraps of metal to collect, coals to bank for the next day. The forge, still glowing, casts long shadows across the stone floor. and Thomas moves through the fading light, every muscle heavy with fatigue. He longs for his blanket on the cold floor, for sleep that comes hard and leaves him almost as tired as before. Days blend into weeks, weeks into months. The seasons shift outside, but inside the forge, the only weather is heat and sweat and the persistent ache of muscles pushed beyond their limits. There is no thought of rest, no expectation that tomorrow will bring anything different. The forge demands everything, and in return, it offers the slow, steady transformation of boy into craftsman, not through words or teaching, but through the unbroken, grinding rhythm of work without end. The forge is a world alive with its own music, an intricate symphony of sound, light, and scent that begins before sunrise and echoes long after the village has settled into sleep. Each day, the performance begins anew, conducted by the steady hands of Master Edmund and the learning grip of Thomas, who is slowly discovering that blacksmithing is as much about listening and watching as it is about strength. When the bellows are set in motion, the first notes of the day ring out, a low, steady whoosh of air feeding the coals, turning a sleeping bed of embers into a living heart of fire. The temperature rises, and with it the forge changes color, from sullen red to hungry orange to a dazzling yellow that seems almost unnatural. Shadows tremble along the soot-black walls, flickering with every breath of the flames. Tools are selected and arranged with the reverence of ritual. Hammers of different shapes and weights hang on pegs, each one used for a specific purpose. A lighter cross-peen for delicate curves, a heavy sledge for thick bars, a ball peen for gentle shaping. Tongs, tanged and twisted, are chosen according to the thickness of the workpiece, and they clack and scrape as Thomas lines them up, his hands still awkward, but growing more sure with each passing day. Iron is more than just a material. It is the protagonist, moody and stubborn, demanding respect. The first bar is slid into the hottest part of the fire, disappearing in a swirl of smoke. For a few heartbeats, nothing happens. Then a transformation begins. The end of the bar takes on a soft red glow, deepening into orange, the heat radiating outward so intensely that Thomas has to look away. At just the right moment, he grips the tongs and draws the metal out, its tip shining like a piece of captured sunlight. The anvil is the stage. When the iron meets its surface, the real concert starts. Each blow of the hammer is a percussive note, deep and ringing when struck true, a dull thud if the angle is wrong, a quick, high chime when the edge is tested for sharpness. Sparks leap from the contact, tiny fireflies that arc and spin in the air before winking out on the dusty floor. Some land on bare skin, stinging sharply before fading, marking the smiths with a constellation of tiny, familiar burns. The process of forging is never rushed, never the same twice. For a nail, Thomas learns to flatten, taper, then shape a head in a flurry of precise, practiced moves. For a horseshoe, the iron is curved just so, its symmetry judged by the master's eye and the apprentice's growing instinct. The work is rhythmic, hypnotic, the hammer rising and falling, the metal turning with each blow, a dance repeated 1,000 times, but always slightly different. There is a smell to every stage of the process. The raw mineral scent of cold iron gives way to the sharp tang of hot metal, the bitter edge of burning coal, and the earthy aroma of steam when a red-hot piece is quenched in the barrel. The hiss as the metal hits water is a punctuation mark in the music, a sharp exhalation, a cloud of vapor that momentarily fills the air with a ghostly presence. Underneath it all, there is a silence filled with focus. Thomas watches Edmund's every move, the angle of the wrist, the way he tilts the tongs to shield his hand from heat, the slight flex in his knees as he absorbs the hammer's impact. The master rarely speaks during these moments, letting the work itself provide the lesson. The forge becomes a place of communion, where knowledge passes not through words, but through the shared rhythm of movement and breath. By midday, the air is thick with the perfume of labor, a blend of sweat, smoke, and hot iron that seeps into clothes and skin, clinging even after washing. The noise is constant, but never chaotic. Every clang and sizzle has its place in the order of things. The day's work leaves behind not just finished tools and glowing coals, but an atmosphere of accomplishment, a sense that within these walls, something raw and unformed has been transformed by will and fire into a thing of use and beauty. In the Smithy's symphony, Thomas is still learning his part, guided by the older man whose every movement is a note in the ongoing composition. The magic of the forge is real. It is the miracle of turning earth into purpose, chaos into order, sound into meaning. And as dusk approaches, the music winds down, each ember's glow a last, lingering chord in a song that will begin again with tomorrow's light. The forge is a place where danger is never far away. The risks do not lurk in dark corners. They are always present, woven into the very air that Thomas and Edmund breathe, stitched into the rhythm of their daily work. Each day brings its own hazards, some dramatic, others so subtle they become a quiet, invisible thread in the lives of those who serve the fire. It starts with the heat. Even a careless brush of a hand against a piece of iron that seems cool can leave a blister that aches for days. The glowing metal, beautiful in its transformation, is also a predator, quick to punish hesitation or distraction. Thomas bears fresh reminders on his arms and hands, small circular burns where flying sparks landed, a thin line along his forearm from where the tongs slipped. Edmund, older and more cautious, still carries the legacy of accidents suffered long ago. The shiny, pale patches on his wrists, the missing edge of one eyebrow, the gnarled fingers of his left hand, each a record of pain and recovery. But the forge is relentless. The bellows breathe new life into the flames, and every new task holds its own peril. Hammering too close to the anvil's edge can send a chip of iron spinning out, a shard that can slice through skin or strike an unprotected eye. Tongs heated by the fire can slip from tired hands, sending hot metal tumbling to the floor. Sometimes a tool left too close to the coals is picked up in haste, its heat invisible but fierce enough to scorch a palm before it can be dropped. Even the floor itself, littered with tiny fragments and shavings, is a danger. One misstep and a bare foot finds a spike of cooling iron. The forge is relentless. The bellows breathe new life into the flames, and every new task holds its own peril. Hammering too close to the anvil's edge can send a chip of iron spinning out, a shard that can slice through skin or strike an unprotected eye. Tongs heated by the fire can slip from tired hands, sending hot metal tumbling to the floor. Sometimes a tool left too close to the coals is picked up in haste, its heat invisible but fierce enough to scorch a palm before it can be dropped. Even the floor itself, littered with tiny fragments and shavings, is a danger. One misstep and a bare foot finds a spike of cooling iron. Worse than these are the dangers that do not announce themselves so loudly. The smoke, ever present and thick, creeps into the lungs, coats the throat with an invisible film. At first, Thomas only coughs occasionally, but as the weeks turn to months, he finds his breath coming harder, his chest heavy by nightfall. Edmund's cough is older, deeper, a constant rattle that haunts the quiet hours after work. Both know this sound. Among blacksmiths, it is as familiar as the ring of the hammer, a warning from the body that the forge is not without cost. Fire is a servant and a threat. Every blacksmith dreads the possibility of a spark escaping the hearth, a flame finding dry straw or timber beams overhead. Thomas has heard the stories since he was a child, but one memory stands out above all: the great fire that swept through Millbrook years before. It began with a careless master, a night when the bellows were left untended, and by morning half the village had been consumed. The smithy was lost, as were many homes, and the scars left by that night are still visible: blackened stones in the church wall, a line of younger houses where older ones once stood. Even now, Edmund's eyes grow shadowed when he recalls that night, his voice quiet as he reminds Thomas to watch every ember, to never trust the fire, even for a moment. Sometimes the danger is simply the toll of the work itself. Edmund's hands are swollen and twisted, his joints aching in the cold, his back bowed from years spent over the anvil. He moves more slowly now, careful not to strain muscles long since pushed beyond their limit. Thomas, still young, already feels the deep ache in his shoulders, the way his fingers stiffen by the end of the day. It is a quiet knowledge, shared wordlessly between them, that the body will pay for every skill learned, every task completed. The forge is not a place for weakness or fear. Every injury, every scar, becomes part of the blacksmith's story, a lesson marked in flesh. Thomas learns to respect the danger, to move with care and attention, to listen for the warning hiss of a tool too hot to touch, to watch the color of the fire, to sense the moment when a job turns from safe to perilous. Yet, no matter how careful, no matter how skilled, every day brings a new reminder. In the world of the smithy, fire and iron always demand their due. Within the village, the blacksmith holds a place unlike any other. People rely on the products of the forge in ways they may not even notice. The plow that breaks the earth, the nails that hold roofs above their heads, the locks that guard their meager treasures. Without the smith's skill, the rhythm of daily life would falter. Yet, for all this necessity, Thomas and Edmund both feel the distance that separates the forge from the rest of Millbrook. When Thomas carries a bundle of new hinges to the carpenter, or delivers a set of sharpened sickles to the farmers, he sees the expressions on people's faces. There is always gratitude, sometimes even awe at how raw, lifeless metal becomes something purposeful, but also a subtle reserve, a hesitation that lingers just beneath polite words. The villagers know the blacksmith is essential, but few want to linger at the threshold of the smithy longer than they must. Some will cross themselves as they approach, glancing at the forge's fiery mouth as if half expecting something to leap from its depths. The forge stands a little apart from the other houses, its smoke a constant plume on the edge of the village. Children are warned not to play too close, told tales of the dangers inside, but also half-whispered stories about the secrets a smith might know. Women will send their sons with broken tools rather than enter the smithy themselves. Even the elders, full of years and experience, show a quiet deference to Edmund, nodding respectfully when they pass on the road, but never quite meeting his eyes for long. There are moments when the blacksmith's position brings privilege. During harvest, when a plowshare cracks or a wagon axle snaps, it is Edmund they seek out first, voices urgent, sometimes even desperate. When a horse must be shod before a long journey, the master's word is trusted above all. Payment might be in coin, grain, or favor, but it always carries with it a subtle recognition. Without the blacksmith, Work and progress grind to a halt. Yet this reliance breeds its own kind of suspicion. The villagers know fire is dangerous, unpredictable, and that anyone who can master it must possess a knowledge that borders on the mysterious. It is whispered that blacksmiths can heal as well as make, that their touch can bless or curse, that secrets passed down in the glow of the forge are not meant for outsiders. Some even believe that a smith's anger can bring misfortune, that the hammer's sound echoes further than anyone realizes. Thomas feels these undercurrents most acutely in the quiet moments, when he sits outside the smithy at dusk, watching the smoke drift across the fields, or when he walks through the market and conversations pause, only to resume in lowered voices as he passes by. There is pride in the craft, but also loneliness. The forge is always set apart, its boundaries marked not just by walls, but by the invisible line of respect and unease that keeps the community close, yet always at a careful distance. Even so, there are times when the blacksmith's isolation is broken. On festival days, when the village gathers for feasts and celebration, Edmund is sometimes invited to share in the food and laughter, his presence a symbol of the strength and continuity of their world. But even in these moments, Thomas notices how quickly people return to their clusters, how the laughter at the forge is always a little more restrained. The blacksmith is honored, respected, and needed, but never quite one of them, always, somehow, a world apart. For the apprentice, life is measured out in work and obedience. The day Thomas entered the forge as a boy, his world shrank to the boundaries of the stone walls and the rules of his master. There is no contract, no gentle handshake, only a word given and a future surrendered for the promise of learning a craft. The apprentice's years are not his own. They belong to the forge, to the village's needs, and most of all, to Master Edmund. Each day begins before the sun, often before even the birds have stirred. Thomas's bed is a patch of rough floor by the far wall, a thin blanket doing little to keep away the cold of the stones in winter or the damp in spring. Sleep is uneasy, sometimes broken by the coughing of Edmund or the distant howl of wind through the cracks. There is no comfort here, only the hope that another day's work will bring him closer to acceptance, closer to the mastery that means survival and respect. His first duties are the lowest: cleaning ashes from under the anvil, hauling buckets of water from the well, scrubbing soot from the walls, carrying coal until his arms ache and his fingernails turn black. Meals are quick and sparse, the leftovers from Edmund's table after the master and his family have finished eating. Bread, sometimes a sliver of cheese, or a few spoonfuls of broth, never quite enough to fill the hollow ache in his stomach. There is no room for complaint. Hunger becomes as familiar as the burn of his muscles. Instruction comes by way of observation and repetition, rarely by words. Edmund expects Thomas to learn quickly, to watch with hungry eyes and pick up the rhythms without being told twice. A mistake is met not with patient explanation, but with a scolding glance, a barked command, or, on worse days, a cuff on the ear. The forge is no place for softness. Accidents are punished with extra chores or sharper words, and Thomas learns to keep his head down and his mouth shut, storing up questions for another time, another life. The work is relentless. Days blur together in an endless cycle of fire and iron, sweat and fatigue. The village children pass by the smithy on their way to school or chores, casting curious glances at the boy hunched over the bellows, soot-streaked and silent. Some days, Thomas envies their freedom, their laughter outside the walls, but he knows this path is his, and turning back is not an option. The only escape is through mastery, through enduring, surviving, and, one day, surpassing his master. At night, he sometimes lies awake, listening to the quiet creaks of the cooling forge, the distant sound of Edmund's voice muttering in sleep. Fear is his constant companion. Fear of failing, of making a costly mistake, of angering the man on whom his future depends. Even praise, when it comes, is faint and rare, never outright, but hinted at in a grunt, a nod, or the absence of scolding. Shame and humiliation are woven into every day, each misstep a lesson that leaves a mark deeper than any bruise. Yet, somewhere in this harsh apprenticeship, resilience begins to grow. Thomas becomes attuned to the smallest cues, the way the master's footsteps sound in the morning, the tilt of his head when something is wrong, the silent signals that mean a task was done well enough. The discipline of hardship shapes his character more surely than any tool shapes iron. Through deprivation and toil, the apprentice finds the first faint glimmer of transformation, not into freedom, but into a craftsman capable of withstanding the demands of a world that offers nothing for free. Over the months and then years, the forge does more than carve muscle into Thomas's arms and scar tissue onto his hands. It begins to change the way he thinks, feels, and even sees himself. The pain and fatigue that once filled every waking moment slowly become part of the background, replaced by a new awareness of the subtle victories hidden in the hardest days. Each scar that appears, a puckered burn on his wrist, a line of calloused skin along his knuckles, a faded bruise on his forearm, marks both a mistake and the lesson it forced upon him. They are not just wounds, but milestones on the journey from frightened boy to something steadier, more resilient. Thomas starts to notice how the world outside the smithy grows more distant. The laughter of children, the shouts from the market, even the songs that drift over from the fields, all of it fades to a dull echo behind the constant roar of the fire and the sharp music of the hammer. He spends his days with only Edmund and the tools for company, the routine so relentless that the boundaries between day and night, work and rest, become almost meaningless. Friends from childhood pass him by on the road, grown taller, their faces unfamiliar now. Sometimes he waves, but more often he simply watches, unsure what he would say if they stopped. Yet in that isolation, something vital begins to grow. Alone with the iron and the rhythm of the forge, Thomas finds space to measure himself not against others, but against his own past. Where once he would flinch at the heat, he now stands steady, able to sense the exact moment when the metal is ready. The tongs, once awkward in his hands, now feel like natural extensions of his will, capable of precise, delicate movements. The anvil no longer intimidates him. It is a partner in the work, its familiar scars a comfort rather than a warning. There are moments when pride, quiet and unexpected, takes root. The first time a batch of nails emerges perfect, their heads clean and even, Thomas lets himself smile in the shadow of the forge. When Edmund grunts approval, the sound is worth more than a week's worth of rest. Small victories, a hinge that swings smoothly, a horseshoe that fits the village mare without need of adjustment, a new tool for the carpenter that draws a nod of genuine gratitude. These are the rewards that make the hardship bearable. But the loneliness never quite leaves. Even as he grows stronger, Thomas feels the weight of solitude pressing in at the edges. The forge is its own world, and while he is learning to master every aspect of it, he cannot ignore the quiet ache that comes from being set apart. Some days he wonders if the price is too high, if the scars, both seen and unseen, are worth the slow climb toward mastery. Yet, as dusk falls and the last glow of the fire fades, Thomas stands in the center of the smithy and feels for the first time a sense of belonging, not just to the work, but to himself. The journey is far from over, but in the quiet, lonely hours, he recognizes the beginnings of transformation, a hard-won strength that nothing and no one can take away. The forge glows at night like a beacon on the edge of the village, and with it comes a collection of stories that swirl through Millbrook and beyond. The blacksmith's world is steeped in a kind of magic, not the studied alchemy of books and scholars, but the rough, whispered kind, born from fear and awe. To the villagers, iron itself holds mysterious power, and the one who bends it to his will seems to stand with one foot in the natural world and the other in something older, stranger. Children are told not to linger at the forge after sunset, for it's said the boundary between this world and the next grows thin where iron is shaped. Neighbors share tales of blacksmiths who can drive away evil spirits with a single nail, or who hammer special symbols into horseshoes to ward off misfortune. Some speak in hushed voices of smiths who can mend not just metal, but broken bodies, curing sickness with talismans forged in fire, or crafting charms to hang above a newborn's cradle. Even Edmund, who scoffs at superstition, keeps an old iron key nailed above the doorway, a silent nod to tradition and the weight of legend. Now and then, a customer comes not for a tool or weapon, but for something less tangible. A twisted ring of iron to hang in the barn and protect the cows, a nail to be driven into the threshold of a new house, or a small amulet, simple and ugly, meant to shield the wearer from bad luck. Thomas listens as these requests are whispered, the villagers careful not to meet his eyes, as if the asking itself might invite something powerful. On stormy nights, the forge is the last place in Millbrook with light and heat, and even the bravest sometimes slip through the rain to ask for a piece of iron, believing it will turn away lightning or worse. There are stories, too, of smiths who can see omens in the color of the flames, who know when to strike for good fortune or when to wait for a sign. Some say the ringing of the anvil at midnight is an answer to a secret wish, or a warning if you know how to listen. The church frowns on such beliefs, yet even the priest looks uneasy when passing the smithy, the flicker of the fire reflecting in his eyes. Old women mutter prayers when the forge roars, and children dare each other to run up and touch the door, as if braving a dragon's lair. Thomas finds himself caught between worlds, learning the strict, rational craft of shaping metal, yet surrounded by these persistent whispers of the supernatural. Sometimes, late at night, as he tends the dying embers, he wonders if there isn't something to the stories after all. The shadows seem to move just a little more on those evenings, the silence broken only by the soft, secretive hiss of the cooling forge. Every blacksmith, Edmund included, knows there are mysteries in their work that defy explanation. The transformation of cold, stubborn iron into a shining tool is a kind of magic in itself, a daily reminder that skill and faith, muscle and myth all have their place in the glowing heart of the fire. In the end, it is this sense of wonder, as much as the labor and pain, that binds Thomas to his craft, giving each day at the forge an undercurrent of possibility and awe. In the end, it is this sense of wonder, as much as the labor and pain, that binds Thomas to his craft, giving each day at the forge an undercurrent of possibility and awe. Every strike of the hammer is more than just a sound. It's a calculation, an act of hope or caution, a wager on tomorrow. Behind the glow of the forge and the satisfaction of work well done, the blacksmith's world is tightly bound to the unforgiving math of materials, trade, and the shifting fortunes of the village. For Thomas and Edmund, every day's labor is shadowed by questions of gain or loss, the risk that prosperity could tip into hardship with little warning. Iron is never free. Bars and billets must be purchased from distant traders, who arrive only a handful of times each year, their prices rising with the rumors of war, poor harvests, or a merchant lost on the road. Coal, too, must be bought or traded for, often paid in advance, by promising the work of many future weeks. Some seasons, Edmund bargains for a bulk shipment, hoping the extra weight will see them through winter or a string of large orders. But more often, the smith's purse feels light. The best iron reserved for the most urgent work, every scrap saved and melted down again for another chance. Barter is the language of survival. Few villagers have coin to spare, so the blacksmith's work is often repaid in bread, sacks of grain, or a share of autumn apples. Sometimes the price of a repair is settled months later, a promise written not on paper but in the shared memory of neighbors and the quiet trust that next season's harvest will be better. Thomas grows used to the uncertainty, to the cupboard that is sometimes full and sometimes bare, to the hope that a rush of spring repairs or a new building in the village will fill their stores just enough to last. There are lean years when too many farmers bring broken plows at once and the waiting list grows longer than the daylight hours. There are times when competition creeps in, a new smith setting up shop in the next village over, or a traveling tinker offering tools at lower prices, tempting customers away. Edmund greets such news with a frown, knowing that loyalty is fragile and survival means working harder, faster, sometimes for less than the labor is worth. The forge is a place of pride, but it cannot run on pride alone.
Debt is a constant companion. Iron bought on credit, coal borrowed from a neighbor, even food advanced by the miller. All must be paid, and the threat of falling behind looms like a storm over every busy day. Thomas listens to Edmund's quiet calculations in the evening, the tally of what is owed and what is left, the worry kept mostly hidden but never absent. The forge must never stand empty. Every day it sits cold is a day closer to trouble. Yet in rare seasons, fortune smiles. A lord might commission a new set of horseshoes for his stable, or a merchant passing through with a caravan may request a dozen blades at once, paying in silver and leaving enough behind to see the smithy through the winter. These moments feel almost magical, the joy of a heavy purse and a table set with food, laughter echoing against the walls that have seen too many lean years. But everyone knows such luck is as fleeting as summer. Tomorrow's misfortune may already be on the road. The blacksmith learns to accept uncertainty, to save our prosperity without expecting it to last. Every tool made, every hinge mended, every barrel hoop shaped is a step along the narrow path between plenty and want. In this world, skill is vital, but so is prudence, the patience to wait out hardship, and the wisdom to know that sometimes survival itself is the greatest triumph the forge can offer. The forge stands at the crossroads of village life, both physically and in spirit, its walls echoing with more than just the ring of the hammer. For Thomas, it becomes clear that the smithy is not merely a workshop, but a gathering place, a silent witness to the stories, struggles, and shared hopes of Millbrook's people. From dawn until dusk, the villagers drift through its door, each carrying their burdens, their needs, and sometimes their quarrels. In the morning, before the fields have swallowed up the farmers and the shepherds have led their flocks away, the blacksmith's fire is already burning. Neighbors stop by with news and requests, a broken latch, a scythe that needs sharpening, a kettle in need of repair. While they wait, they exchange gossip and stories, their voices mingling with the sounds of the anvil. Some bring bread or eggs, others a jug of ale or a bundle of fresh herbs as payment or thanks. The smithy's air is thick with the sense of work and life, hot metal, sweat, earth, and sometimes laughter. Children gather near the doorway, peering in with wide eyes,
hoping to catch a glimpse of sparks or the rhythmic ballet of tools in motion. For them, the smithy is a place of mystery and awe, a stage where everyday things are transformed into something new. On rainy afternoons, the forge offers shelter and warmth. On market days, it becomes a crossroads where villagers pause to share a word or rest their feet. But the forge is not only a place of comfort, it is also where disputes are settled, sometimes quietly, sometimes with voices raised. If a neighbor suspects his plow was mended unfairly, or if a tool breaks before its time, the matter is brought to Edmund for judgment. His word carries weight, for everyone knows the blacksmith's reputation rests on fairness as much as on skill. Thomas learns to watch these moments closely, to understand how trust is built and how easily it can be lost. The dependence between the smith and the village runs deep. Without the blacksmith, fields would go untilled, wagons unmended, and harvests left vulnerable. Yet the smithy in turn relies on the village for food, fuel, and companionship. In times of abundance, generosity flows both ways. A full granary means the forge stays busy, and a successful harvest fills the blacksmith's larder. In lean years, hardship is shared. There are days when Thomas sees Edmund accept payment in promises and good faith, knowing that the health of the forge is bound to the fate of every home and family in Millbrook. When sickness or trouble comes, the smithy often becomes a hub for mutual aid. Neighbors gather to repair damage after a storm, or to pool resources in times of need. The forge, with its ever-burning fire, stands as a symbol of resilience and endurance, its warmth extending far beyond its walls. Yet, beneath all the cooperation, rivalries and jealousies sometimes simmer. Accusations of favoritism, old grudges, or the suspicion that one family's tools are always mended first can cause friction. Thomas witnesses these conflicts and learns the delicate art of mediation, seeing how the blacksmith's steady hand and even temper can smooth rough edges and restore harmony. Through every season, the smithy remains a living heart of the village. Its heat, its rhythm, its unspoken promise of shared survival. For Thomas, growing within this world, the lines between work, community, and self become ever more entwined. The story of the forge is not just the story of iron and fire, but of people and the bonds they forge, together, day by day. As Thomas's skill and awareness grow, so does his understanding of the larger world beyond Millbrook. The forge, once the entire universe, begins to feel like just one bright spark in a much broader constellation, a network of blacksmiths and craftsmen linked by centuries of tradition and, increasingly, by the strict order of the guilds. It begins with distant talk, stories carried by traders, or by visiting journeymen who pass through the village, their aprons marked with unfamiliar crests. These smiths speak of towns where the work of the forge is regulated, where every anvil rings under the gaze of a powerful brotherhood. Edmund listens with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The word guild is spoken with both respect and wariness. For some, it means recognition, higher standing, even protection. For others, it signals new burdens, restrictions, and the steady tightening of outside control. Guilds emerge as both shield and gatekeeper. They bring organization to a world once shaped by individual skill and reputation. Rules are established for everything: how apprentices are chosen, what prices may be charged, which techniques are guarded as secrets, and even the hours during which work may be done. Each smith, no matter how skilled, must now prove his worth, not only to his customers, but to the elders of the guild, whose judgment can open doors or shut them forever. Edmund, having spent most of his life as an independent master, is wary of the new order. He explains to Thomas that joining a guild means paying dues, regular payments that constrain a small forge, especially in lean years. But without membership, certain doors remain closed. Only guildsmiths may accept the best commissions, or train apprentices officially, or sell work at the big town markets. The guilds have their own hierarchies, a council of elders who set the rules and distribute favors, creating a subtle, often invisible elite among blacksmiths. Some rise quickly, favored by politics or family connections. Others labor in obscurity, no matter their talent. For apprentices, the guild's presence means a new set of hurdles. Thomas hears of boys who must present a masterpiece, a perfect tool or weapon, to be judged before they can earn the title of master themselves. For those who fail, the path is long and uncertain, their efforts dismissed with a nod or a single sharp word. There are tales, too, of intrigue and rivalry, secrets stolen from rival forges, sabotage in competitions, even the quiet spreading of rumors to undermine a competitor's reputation. The guild's influence reaches into every corner of the profession. Standards for quality are set, enforced with inspections and the threat of fines. Prices are fixed, sometimes against the smith's own judgment. Innovation is both encouraged and stifled. New methods may bring fame, but stepping outside the rules can lead to punishment or exile. The very structure that brings order can also breed resentment, and Thomas observes the tension among those who long for freedom and those who value stability above all. Yet, despite the challenges, there is an undeniable strength in the brotherhood of the guild. When disaster strikes, a fire, a theft, a sudden illness, guild members rally to support one another, lending tools, sharing secrets, offering work. The guild gives the blacksmith a sense of belonging to something larger, an identity and purpose that extends beyond the village's edge. For Thomas, the prospect is both daunting and alluring. To be judged by his peers, to earn their respect, and to find his own place within the great tradition that binds every anvil, every spark across the land. Change arrives not all at once, but in small, uncertain ripples. New words carried by travelers, glimpses of unfamiliar tools in a distant town, rumors that seem almost too strange to believe. At first, Thomas hears only whispers of machines that can do the work of many men, of water wheels that power hammers large enough to shape iron in a single thunderous blow. For Edmund, the stories seem half legend, half threat, a challenge to the order he has known all his life. But soon enough, the signs become impossible to ignore. One autumn, a merchant arrives with a wagon full of iron parts and tales of a great forge beyond the river, where water is channeled through clever wooden wheels, turning vast, heavy hammers that fall in perfect rhythm. The smiths there can shape metal faster than any human arm, producing blades, nails, and bars in numbers the old forges could never match. For some in Millbrook, the thought is thrilling: progress, abundance, perhaps even less toil. For others, it stirs unease, a sense that something irreplaceable may be lost. Edmund watches the horizon with a new kind of caution. He tells Thomas that while the water hammer is a marvel, it cannot replace a smith's eye or a master's touch. Yet in the same breath, he cannot hide a flicker of worry. How will the small forges compete when the market fills with cheap, mass-produced iron? The villagers begin to notice too. Merchants bringing finished goods at lower prices, farmers tempted by tools that are uniform, if not always perfect. Inside the smithy, the debate between old and new is more than philosophical. Thomas feels the weight of tradition in every swing of the hammer, but also a stirring curiosity about what might be possible. Could the work be less punishing? Might there be more time for learning, for invention, for living beyond the endless demands of muscle and fire? At night, he dreams of gears and water wheels, his mind turning with visions of the forge transformed. The rift grows, quietly but steadily, between those who embrace the machines and those who hold fast to the ancient ways. Some smiths travel to the big towns to study the new methods, hoping to secure their future by adapting early. Others, like Edmund, resist, arguing that no machine can replace the artistry of a handmade blade or the subtlety of a well-balanced tool. In the tavern and at the market, arguments flare. Some say progress is a blessing, others call it a curse. Economically, the effects are immediate. Work that once paid well now brings in less. The village smith must compete with distant workshops whose goods flood the markets. Customers begin to ask for things they never dreamed of before: lighter tools, new shapes, repairs at a speed impossible for a single pair of hands. The value of experience is questioned, the prestige of the master's work quietly eroded by the certainty and speed of the new machines. Psychologically, the changes run even deeper. Edmund grows more silent, sometimes angry, sometimes simply tired. He fears for the future of his craft, and more than that, for the sense of purpose and respect it once brought. Thomas feels torn between loyalty and ambition, the comfort of tradition and the pull of innovation. The forge itself seems to wait, suspended between two worlds, one shaped by the memory of 1,000 hands, the other by the promise of gears, water, and untested dreams. Through it all, the fire must still be tended, and the day's work must go on. Yet every blow of the hammer now echoes with questions. What will be lost? What will endure? And what new forms will the ancient spirit of the forge take, as the first great machines rise to challenge the rhythm of the human hand? As the world beyond Millbrook grows ever more restless with invention, the face of blacksmithing shifts in ways both thrilling and unsettling. Mass production, once a rumor from distant cities, becomes a force that reaches even the quietest villages. Tools and implements, once shaped by the patient hands of a single master, now arrive by the cartload, identical, unremarkable, their origins traced not to a craftsman, but to the humming, tireless jaws of a great factory. Thomas notices the changes in the faces of the villagers. There is admiration for the new, cheaper goods, but a shadow too, as the sense of pride in owning a tool made by a neighbor begins to fade. Some still come to the smithy for repairs, for the feel of a grip tailored to their hand, for a blade shaped with a particular purpose in mind. But more and more, the forge's work is dictated by outside demands, by orders placed not across the anvil, but through letters delivered by strangers, requests written in a hand unfamiliar and signed with a noble's crest. The old certainty, work shaped by the village's needs, the smith answering only to his own sense of rightness, begins to erode. Now, the most lucrative commissions come not from neighbors, but from the estates of wealthy landowners, distant and faceless. The smithy must produce pieces in sets, each one matching the next, to satisfy requirements set by a steward or overseer. Payment, though generous, arrives slowly and sometimes with conditions attached. A single delay or imperfection can mean the loss of a contract, or worse, an unwelcome visit from a stern representative. With this new dependence comes an unfamiliar anxiety. Edmund, who once spoke with pride of the forge's independence, now finds himself reading and rereading letters, worrying over deadlines and the whims of those with power. The village smith, once a figure whose skill commanded respect, is at risk of becoming merely another link in a chain of supply, valued more for speed and obedience than for artistry or wisdom. For Thomas, the shift is dizzying. There are new tools to master, new measurements and standards to meet, but also new doubts. Can a blacksmith still call himself a master when so much of his work is done to the specifications of others, his creativity constrained by orders from far away. The sense of community, once anchored in the shared rhythm of need and provision, feels looser now, stretched thin by outside influences and the demands of unseen patrons. And yet, within the uncertainty, there are glimpses of opportunity. The money from large commissions can provide security unknown in earlier years. New techniques and challenges can sharpen a smith's skills. Some see the chance to grow, to build a name beyond the village, to send their work to distant places and distant people. Others fear what will be lost, the quiet pride of a job done well and recognized by those who know your name, the steady heartbeat of the forge as the center of village life. Each day at the anvil now brings both hope and worry, the promise of prosperity woven with the threat of dependency. The blacksmith stands at a crossroads, the road ahead crowded with possibility and shadow, his own future shaped by forces he cannot fully control, yet must somehow learn to survive. As the world of ironwork expands, the once unified craft of the blacksmith begins to fracture and evolve. Where every village smith had once been a jack of all trades, shaping everything from nails to swords, horseshoes to kitchen knives, now new forms of expertise begin to emerge, each demanding its own kind of mastery. The old identity of the blacksmith shifts, replaced by a landscape of specialists, each fiercely guarding their place in a changing world. Word spreads through the countryside of master armorers in distant cities, their workshops echoing with the ring of steel on steel as they fashion intricate breastplates and helms for knights and their retainers. Across the river, a renowned weaponsmith forges blades famed for their balance and strength, his name known to soldiers far and wide. In another town, farriers devote their lives to the art of shoeing horses, learning every quirk of hoof and gait, their expertise as prized as any doctor's. Thomas sees these changes ripple even through Millbrook. A traveling arbalist visits, offering to teach the subtle mechanics of crossbow construction. Delicate gears and strings, precise measurements, wood joined seamlessly with steel. Some villagers look to the future and encourage their sons to learn the new trades, believing that specialization will bring wealth and security. The smithy, once a place where any problem could be brought, now sees customers inquiring about the best craftsman for a specific need. A farmer for his plow, a hunter for his arrowheads, a merchant for locks and keys. With new niches come new rivalries. Competition grows fierce, not just between villages, but within them. Whispers of unfair practices, secret techniques, or stolen designs circulate. Guilds, too, adjust to the age of the specialist, creating separate ranks and privileges for armorers, farriers, toolmakers, and weaponsmiths. Meetings are no longer gathering of equals, but negotiations between groups with diverging interests and ambitions. The fight for clients, for apprentices, and for the favor of wealthy patrons intensifies. With new niches come new rivalries. Competition grows fierce, not just between villages, but within them. Whispers of unfair practices, secret techniques, or stolen designs circulate. Guilds, too, adjust to the age of the specialist, creating separate ranks and privileges for armorers, farriers, toolmakers, and weaponsmiths. Meetings are no longer gathering of equals, but negotiations between groups with diverging interests and ambitions. The fight for clients, for apprentices, and for the favor of wealthy patrons intensifies.
For the blacksmith, this divided world is both promise and peril. Specialization offers the chance to excel, to be recognized for a particular genius, to earn commissions that would once have seemed impossible. But it also means narrowing one's focus, risking obsolescence if fashions or fortunes shift. The first disputes over territory and talent leave marks, friendships strained,
alliances formed and broken, reputations rising and falling as quickly as the markets for their goods. Thomas feels these pressures daily. Should he dedicate himself to the patient science of weaponsmithing, hoping for glory on distant battlefields? Should he follow the steady trade of the farrier, whose work is always needed, or master the subtle art of fine locks and hinges? Each path offers reward and risk, and the village itself seems to hold its breath, watching as the old order gives way to something more complex and uncertain. Amidst this division, one truth remains: mastery still demands the same discipline and sacrifice. Whether shaping a sword's edge, fitting a horseshoe, or crafting a delicate mechanism, the heart of the work is unchanged. Yet the blacksmith must now do more than forge iron. He must forge a new place for himself in a world where every spark of talent is a battle for survival, and every day is a contest to hold on to a patch of light beneath the sun. The world of the forge, long seen as the province of men, is never truly closed to women and children. Though tradition dictates that the blacksmith's hammer is the tool of a strong arm and a hardened will, the reality within many workshops is far more complex and alive with hidden stories. In quiet corners and at quieter hours, the shape of iron is often guided by hands both small and slender, each leaving a mark upon the legacy of the craft. In Millbrook and villages like it, the work of the smithy is often a family affair. Edmund's wife, though rarely seen at the anvil, manages the flow of barter and trade, tallying debts and credits, negotiating with merchants, and keeping the household books with a precision that ensures the forge never runs short of coal or bread. Her authority is felt in every corner, her words sometimes even outweighing the master's when it comes to the practical business of survival. The smith's daughters may be sent to market with samples of work, skilled in persuading customers or haggling for the best price on a shipment of iron. For some, the line between helper and apprentice is blurred. Young children, Thomas included, are expected to fetch tools, sort scrap, and pump the bellows, each task a lesson in endurance and responsibility. The rhythm of work becomes the background to their upbringing, each child learning early the dangers of the forge and the necessity of vigilance. Laughter and stories sometimes echo above the sound of hammer and tongues. And in the quiet moments between tasks, older siblings pass on the secret tricks of the trade to the younger ones. There are women who refuse to remain in the background. In other towns, tales are told of widows who inherit a smithy and take up the hammer themselves, forging nails, hinges, and even blades with a skill equal to any man. Their presence challenges old prejudices, sometimes drawing scorn, sometimes admiration, and often a wary kind of respect. A few become legends, masters of their craft who train new generations, their signatures stamped into ironwork that finds its way far beyond their home village. The emergence of family-run smithies changes the nature of the business. With multiple hands at work, the forge can take on more orders, diversify its products, and weather hard seasons more easily. Husbands and wives become partners not just in life, but in the heat of creation and the careful management of risk. When illness strikes or a war claims the village's young men, it is often the women and children who keep the fires burning, the tools in use, and the forge's heartbeat steady. For Thomas, these realities are never distant. He learns from everyone around him, not just from Edmund. He witnesses the quiet authority of women who are as much a part of the smithy's strength as the iron itself. He sees the ways children grow into their roles, the pride they take in each new skill, and the hope they bring for the future of the craft. The world may speak of blacksmithing as a man's domain, but within the smoke and clangor of the forge, it is clear that every hand shapes the story, every voice is heard, and every life leaves its mark on the anvil's enduring face. The life of the blacksmith unfolds beneath the watchful gaze of both church and tradition, each with its own rules, fears, and blessings. In Millbrook, as in villages throughout the land, faith weaves itself into every aspect of the forge's daily work, sometimes as a comfort, sometimes as a challenge, but always as a presence that cannot be ignored. The church bell marks the passing of hours, calling the faithful to prayer and rest, and even the rhythms of the forge bend to its sound. Edmund and Thomas pause their work on holy days, letting the fire cool while villagers gather for worship. On such mornings, the smithy stands quiet, its doors closed in deference to the sacred, the smell of incense from the church mingling faintly with the lingering scent of coal. The church teaches that work is a gift, but also warns of pride and temptation, reminding craftsmen to serve with humility and honesty. There are rules, some spoken, some whispered, that govern what the blacksmith may create. Weapons, especially, are a matter of careful negotiation with the priest. While tools for the field and home are celebrated, blades and arrowheads often carry a shadow of suspicion, their making considered dangerous or even forbidden during certain holy seasons. The forge's fire, source of so much good, is treated with both awe and caution, likened in sermons to the fires of purification and the dangers of excess. Yet the church also blesses the work of the smith. On special feast days, the priest may visit the workshop to sprinkle holy water over the tools and the anvil, offering prayers for safety, skill, and prosperity. Bells and chalices for the altar are sometimes forged by the village smith, each piece a matter of pride and solemn responsibility. These commissions are handled with great care, every blow of the hammer accompanied by silent prayers, every imperfection viewed as a spiritual failing as much as a technical one. Religious festivals bring their own rituals. The first tool made after harvest might be dedicated to the church, given as an offering in thanks for the season's bounty. Processions sometimes pass by the forge, the villagers pausing to ask for a blessing of new implements or to honor the smith who helped build the very structure they worship in. The forge itself, at times, is believed to hold a certain sanctity, a place where creation echoes the divine act, where raw earth is transformed by human will and the grace of heaven. But not all is harmonious. There are taboos that linger in the background, times when the smith must refuse a job that seems to invite misfortune, or when rumors spread that the fire has been misused for ill intent. Superstition blends with faith, and the boundary between the sacred and the forbidden is sometimes thin. Still, through every season, the blacksmith walks a path of balance, honoring both the needs of the village and the expectations of the church, finding a kind of spiritual meaning in the steady discipline of work, the dance of fire and iron, and the quiet moments when even the hardest labor feels touched by something greater than human hands. War arrives in the form of distant rumors at Hearst, news carried by traders, unsettling talk at the tavern, stories of armies gathering and borders shifting. For a time, the forge in Millbrook feels unchanged, its work focused on the steady needs of the village. But as the conflict draws nearer, the rhythm of the smithy shifts, the priorities of everyday life giving way to the relentless demands of a world preparing for battle. Requests for plowshares and tools are replaced by urgent orders for arrowheads, spear tips, and sturdy blades. Messengers from nearby towns arrive with sealed letters, each bearing the insignia of a lord or captain, their words formal and impossible to ignore. Payment comes not in bread or grain, but in silver and sometimes promises. There is little time to reflect. The work must be done, and quickly. The forge that once served the slow cycles of the land now pounds out weapons in a feverish tempo, the sound echoing late into the night. Edmund and Thomas find themselves swept up in a new reality. The village, too, feels the change. The fields grow quieter as young men are called away, and the faces at the forge become more anxious. Each new weapon is weighed not just for balance, but for the life it may soon touch. The anvil's familiar ring now carries a sharper note, a sense of urgency and consequence. The forge glows brighter, hotter, the fire stoked not for harvest or home, but for the uncertain hope of protection and survival. The work itself transforms. Techniques once reserved for the finest tools are adapted to the mass production of weapons. Iron is shaped with speed, quantity taking precedence over perfection. Apprentices and helpers are recruited, their hands pressed into service whether ready or not. Mistakes that once meant only wasted effort now feel graver. A flawed blade could mean disaster for someone far away, a failure that haunts even the most practiced craftsmen.
State orders bring resources and pressures of their own. Deliveries of raw material arrive at odd hours, guarded by armed men who watch every movement with suspicion. Officials inspect the work, tallying numbers, pushing for greater output, sometimes threatening penalties for delays. The forge becomes less a part of the village and more an extension of a larger impersonal engine, its labor swallowed up by the needs of armies and distant commanders. Thomas feels the toll in his bones. The satisfaction of a well-made tool is replaced by a kind of numb fatigue, a relentless cycle of forging, quenching, sharpening, and starting again. The faces of those who once came for help or advice now show worry or resentment. Tools for living set aside in favor of weapons for war. The blacksmith, who once embodied the spirit of community and creation, is drawn into a web of necessity, his role changed by the realities of violence and fear. Yet, even as the forge becomes a workshop for conflict, its fire endures. Thomas and Edmund find moments of quiet resolve, holding to the hope that the skills honed in peace might someday return. For now, though, the sound of the hammer is no longer a comfort, but a reminder that the world outside has changed, and that the fate of the village, and perhaps much more, depends on the work carried out in the relentless, blazing heart of the smithy. The seasons move forward, and with them comes a tide of change that sweeps through Millbrook and all the countryside beyond. The old rhythms, the ones that shaped Thomas's earliest memories in the forge, begin to falter, replaced by new habits, new dreams, and a steady, almost unstoppable flow of people and ideas. The world that once seemed eternal in its patterns now feels fragile, its foundations shifting beneath familiar feet. It is not only the arrival of machines or the demands of distant war that unsettle the village, but the slow, relentless transformation of society itself. Younger generations, restless for opportunity and novelty, begin to look beyond the hedges and fields, their eyes fixed on the promise of cities, factories, and the crowded bustle of streets where fortunes might be made. One by one, the old farmhouse is empty. Sons and daughters leave behind the certainty of the forge, the field, and the loom, drawn toward the smoky horizon of industry and commerce. Within the smithy, the consequences are unmistakable. There are fewer apprentices willing to endure the years of hardship that mastery requires. The calloused hands that once shaped the tools of daily life are replaced by machines operated with the turn of a lever, the press of a pedal. Some ancient techniques, ways of working iron that were secrets handed down from master to apprentice, begin to vanish, remembered only in stories or in the worn marks left on tools that gather dust in unused corners.
Edmund, aging now, watches this passing with a mixture of sorrow and acceptance. He tries to share what he knows with Thomas, to keep alive the rituals and wisdom that have defined the forge for centuries. But the world outside is moving quickly. Orders come less often from neighbors, more from distant merchants and companies, each asking for product to exact specifications, with little interest in how they are made or who makes them. New classes emerge. Factory owners, merchants, and overseers claim the wealth and status that once belonged to the craftsman. Even within the village, divisions appear. Those who leave and prosper are envied. Those who stay are sometimes pitied or dismissed. The blacksmith's role as a central figure, a problem solver and creator, fades as the forge becomes one among many, its singular importance diluted in the flood of progress. The crafts that shaped generations, the weaver's shuttle, the cooper's barrel, the smith's hammer, face the threat of extinction. Old rivalries lose their edge, replaced by the shared uncertainty of a future where skill and tradition matter less than adaptability and speed. Stories that once defined identity are told less often, their lessons overtaken by new priorities and new heroes. For Thomas, this is a time of reflection and quiet determination. He treasures the lessons of the past, but recognizes the need to adapt, to learn new ways, even as he honors the old. The forge, though quieter now, still burns with the memory of all that has come before, a symbol of endurance in a world that seems determined to reinvent itself with every passing year. In this age of upheaval, the greatest challenge is not merely to survive, but to carry forward some spark of tradition, a link between what was and what may yet be. Even as the forge's clamor softens beneath the march of progress, there remain those who refuse to let its spirit be extinguished. In quiet corners and small villages, among the shrinking brotherhood of craftsmen, the soul of blacksmithing endures, carried by old masters who cling to the traditions that shaped their lives, and by a new few who recognize the irreplaceable value of what machines cannot replicate. Stories circulate of legendary smiths, men and women whose hands remember secrets no book records, whose eyes can read the color of metal at a glance, whose work is marked by a precision and grace only achieved through decades at the anvil. Edmund, now bent with age, is one of these keepers. He moves more slowly, but every gesture speaks of knowledge honed by thousands of days in the fire. He teaches Thomas the subtle art of finishing a blade so it sings when struck, the special twist of the wrist that gives a horseshoe perfect balance, the quiet patience needed to fix a flaw invisible to any but the most practiced eye. In a world that prizes speed and uniformity, these skills become rare and precious. A handful of patrons, wealthy collectors, nobles with a taste for the unique, even foreign visitors, seek out hand-forged pieces, willing to pay dearly for the touch of individuality that no assembly line can provide. A door hinge made by Thomas bears the tiny irregularities that tell its story. A knife crafted by Edmund carries within it the memory of every master before him. Each piece is more than just an object. It is a testament to endurance, to human creativity, to the stubborn will to make something lasting. Yet the struggle is constant. Many forges fall silent, their owners retiring with no one left to teach or to care. Mechanization offers convenience and profit, but asks in exchange for the surrender of the small wonders that come from a craftsman's hand. Some try to fight back by organizing fairs, demonstrating ancient techniques, or forming societies dedicated to the preservation of traditional arts. The work is slow and often lonely, but the rewards, pride, purpose, and the respect of those who understand are profound. Thomas becomes, almost without realizing, a bridge between worlds. He learns to use new tools, to adapt to changing markets, but never lets go of what Edmund and the old masters have passed down. In his quietest moments, he knows that his truest work is not just in shaping iron, but in preserving the meaning of the craft itself, ensuring that whatever the world demands, something essential is not lost. In these twilight years of the old ways, every handmade nail, every carefully wrought blade shines brighter for its rarity. The value of the unique grows with each year, cherished by those who remember or who long for a world where every object bears the imprint of its maker. The forge, though quieter now, is a place of memory and hope, a sanctuary for the soul of the craft, kept alive by those who refuse to let the last embers die. The dawn of the industrial age sweeps across the land with a force no village, no forge can ignore. Where once the song of the hammer echoed down quiet lanes, now the thunder of engines and the clatter of factory floors fill the air. Towers of brick and glass rise along riverbanks, their smokestacks painting the sky in relentless gray. For the blacksmiths of Millbrook and countless other villages, the world changes almost overnight. Familiar rhythms replaced by the pulse of machines, old certainties dissolved by invention. Factories and workshops spring up in cities and growing towns, drawing men and women from the countryside with promises of steady wages and new opportunity. Some former smiths walk willingly into these places, trading the independence of the village forge for the regularity of clock and whistle. They learn to tend engines, to operate power hammers and presses, their skill at reading metal transformed into new roles as machinists or overseers. For some, the change means escape from the uncertainty and back-breaking labor of the old ways, a chance to earn, to send money home, to buy goods that were once unimaginable luxuries. Others struggle to find their place. The relentless pace of industry leaves little room for tradition or individuality. Here, the value lies in speed, efficiency, and uniformity. Work becomes repetitive. One motion, performed 1,000 times a day, each piece identical to the next. The sense of pride that once came from crafting something unique, from solving a neighbor's problem or leaving a mark on the world, fades amid the hiss and roar of the assembly line. Some former blacksmiths, unable or unwilling to adapt, drift from town to town, their hands forever marked by the memory of the forge, their stories slowly swallowed by the din of progress. Yet the industrial age is not only a source of loss. It brings new kinds of work, specialized, safer in some ways, offering hope to those with imagination and resilience. A few former village smiths rise to prominence as inventors or factory owners, their understanding of metalwork and innovation opening doors their ancestors never dreamed of. New unions and societies form, giving voice to the workers, fighting for better conditions, and forging a different kind of brotherhood. For Thomas, the era is both ending and beginning. He sees the old forge grow quiet, the apprentices fewer, the village changed. But he also discovers possibilities, travel, learning, partnership with others who share his love of creation. He takes with him not just the skills of hammer and fire, but the spirit of the craft, the discipline, the patience, and the belief that human ingenuity can shape any age, no matter how loud or fast the world becomes. In the shadow of the great factories, a few small forges survive, serving those who still value the touch of the hand and the endurance of tradition. They are rarer now, cherished for their history as much as their work. And within each new engine, each vast machine, there remains, if you know where to look, a trace of the old world, the careful eye, the steady hand, the flame that once burned at the heart of every village. The industrial era is not the end, but a transformation, demanding of the blacksmith all the adaptability, creativity, and quiet pride that has always defined the soul of the forge. Long after the last village smithy grows silent, and the clang of the hammer fades into memory, the spirit of the blacksmith endures, woven deep into the very fabric of the world. Walk through any city, along any country road, and you will find echoes of their hands in every hinge and gate, every rail and tool, every subtle curve of metal that shapes the life around us. The forge's fire, though tamed and hidden, still burns, an unbroken line stretching from the earliest days of humankind to the present moment. The legacy of the blacksmith is not just in objects, but in the culture and imagination of civilization itself. Their ingenuity, patience, and courage helped build bridges, shape weapons and plows, and unlock the possibilities of every new age. The artistry of hand-forged metal speaks to a time when every piece carried a story. Every tool bore the mark of an individual skill and hope. In the museums and cathedrals, in old locks and intricate railings, in the delicate tracery of wrought iron gates, the language of the smith still whispers, a language of endurance, creativity, and transformation. Even as the world spins faster, as technology accelerates and production grows ever more distant from the craftsman's touch, the values forged in the old smithies linger. The discipline to see a task through, the humility to learn from fire and failure, the pride in honest work, these qualities remain at the heart of progress. The blacksmith's resilience, his willingness to adapt and create anew, becomes a lesson for every generation. That nothing worth building comes without effort, that every advance is hammered out from the challenges and the dreams of those who came before. In every age, there are those who keep the ember alive, artists, makers, and innovators who return to the forge in spirit, if not in body, finding joy in shaping the raw materials of their time. Their passion honors the memory of all who stood at the anvil, who brought light from flame and order from chaos. The blacksmith story is not just one of sweat and metal, but of hope, the belief that no matter how the world changes, human hands will always find new ways to build, to protect, to create. So the forge's spark endures, scattered but never extinguished, glowing quietly in every crafted thing that holds the promise of use and beauty. The blacksmith's gift is a legacy without end, a chain that binds past to present, reminding us that in every age, the world is shaped not only by machines and power, but by the eternal fire of skill, imagination, and the will to create.